Hello and welcome back to this episode of Cassiotti News. I am your host, Nick, and this is your only platform to break up with the traditional media and get for political parties and their opinions. If you haven't seen our first topic of discussion today, it is linked right above. This is topic number 2, the contrast of Black Lives Matter protests, David. In the summer of 2020, to the protests of the election certification in D.C. yesterday, has leaders of both sides of the protest outraged. The mainstream media doesn't seem to help with hyperpolarization of both positions. What have we learned, David? And how can we move forward together as Americans?
We have the most transparent and obvious example of white supremacy in a systemic fashion being enforced right now. And in order to move forward, we're going to need some serious change and accountability. I attended many of the Black Lives Matter protests this summer. I attended the first one here in Los Angeles that was peaceful and met with brutal police crackdowns. And there were subsequent protests that were also met with the same crackdowns. Was there some destruction of property at some of the Black Lives Matter protests? Yes, but a lot of it also was done by the same white supremacist groups and far-right groups, the accelerationists, who are trying to start some sort of race war by trying to create the impression that these are violent protests. That was also why during the Black Lives Matter protests over the course of, I believe it was 8 days, you had 3 federal officers who were shot and killed by Boogaloo members, right? And these are far-right groups that are trying to create this violence. And the FBI has already documented that these far-right groups have infiltrated law enforcement all over the country. Okay, and you have to think about that when we see these far-right groups and these Trump supporters, when we see MAGA and these groups joining forces and then storming the Capitol. And I've been arrested in DC for peaceful protests, and I can simply say there's always enough police there to repel what just happened, right? The idea that they just strolled in there and there had been warnings online, they had been discussing this openly in chat rooms, and that there was not preparation taken, or that for some reason the police's efforts to quell this or to combat it were thwarted by maybe a higher up, whatever it is, this is clear evidence. We know for a fact that if they were black and brown, they would either have never made it inside the Capitol, or there would be a lot of dead bodies. That's the unfortunate truth.
Angela, does he bring up a good point? I mean, I'm looking at 2 different protests met 2 different ways. Are they correlated, or are they completely separate?
Well, I mean, you can find things that are correlated and things that are completely separate. I mean, good points mixed in with a lot of bad points. For example, I'm a Boogaloo babe. I'm not a far-right nationalist or a white supremacist. I guess you could look into my dating history and find that out for yourself if you really wanted to smear me anyone. But, I think that what we did find out is that the police did not treat BLM protesters and Trump protesters equally. There was definitely a lot more violence on the BLM protesters, but the cops did kill people at both rallies. So, I hope that conservatives can now realize how dangerous the police state is. It must have been really awkward to get arrested when you were holding a back the blue flag. We really need to dial back support for police, and I do think that we need to defund them in certain ways. Absolutely.
Pod, you were intending on going to Washington, D.C. You were intending on being part of that crowd. Were you in any way looking at being met with force from police?
No, the intentions were to be there peacefully. And I think when they dig through the 68 people that they arrested, when they dig through their records and find who they really are, I don't think any of them are Trump supporters. It's just ironic. Maybe if you look at it when we talk about Black Lives Matters, while they're burning the city down and, doing billions of dollars of damage, not a little bit of damage, as was just meant, billions of damage. And you're coming down the street, like we picture with everybody protecting the National Monument. They were there to protect the National Monument, not because of who was protesting, but the destruction that was following them. Now, yesterday you had everybody peacefully walking around, hundreds of thousands of supporting the president. You had some bad apples that did what they did, which was wrong. So, and if you take a look what Antifa is still doing up in Portland, there is no accountability for that. No one's stopping it. They're still riding it. They're still setting up these autonomous zones. I think that the Black Lives Matter being the socialist movement. I mean, the millions of dollars coming in, not even going to help people. It's just they're getting a free pass twisted around.
Joe,
Okay.
for the folks that are watching this right now, we're looking at Republicans saying that it's the same thing as Black Lives Matter movement. Democrats saying that this is completely different. This is treason. It's really hard to disseminate these hyper-polarized positions, right? It's hard to see, okay, you're over here getting clicks for this team. You're over here getting clicks for that team, this tribalism that's going on. What's the middle ground? What does that look like?
Well, there is no middle ground. One of the problems that we're looking at is systemic racism across the entire board. We take a look at the Black Lives Matter rallies across the United States in relationship to the anti-mask rallies, which are generally led by the right, is ultimately a rights issue, a my body, my choice argument, which is odd coming from them. However, that's the way they've decided to frame it. So the people who ended up storming the Capitol are the exact same people who have been storming state capitals for the last 6 months over mask mandates. So these are the same people. Mask mandate, they storm the Capitol in their state. They turn around and think, well, we did it in our state. Why not do it in the nation's capital? So all they did is they've escalated it to the next level. And they were successful. Whether that was just because of dumb luck, culpability of the police force, or whatever, Capitol Mall, we had people videoing them, they opened up the gate and let people walk through. Now, after about 100 people walked through, you had the Capitol Mall cops looking at each other going, guys, I think we may have screwed up. Of course, by that time, the Senate and the House are being sequestered in a bunker somewhere, and they've been told that there's an active shooter drill. And it just gets more bizarre from there. So we can't look at these at the same, because the exact same behavior that was addressed at the state levels, where all of these anti-maskers were allowed easy access, where BLM was shut down because they were protesting disparities in racial justice.
I'm gonna let Angela respond. Go ahead, Angela.
Oh, I want to see more storming of capitals by everyone. I support the rights of Black Lives Matter, feminists, Republicans, Democrats, Libertarians, Green parties, blood-sucking communists, Alex Jones, tinfoil hat wearers. Everyone storm every capital. That makes me excited that people are fed up with government.
Why? Why do you? So I don't want I just don't want the headline, right? We're not here for the headline. We're here to get more. Why are we? Why do you make that claim?
It was really revealing to see the politicians who bomb brown kids in the Middle East and murder people at weddings, cowering in fear, finally in the Capitol building, when protesters who ironically are Republicans bust into the building and start walking in. Those people are murderers. They send people off to war to kill in unjustified wars, and they order our troops to kill innocent people with drone strikes. I'm okay with storming their capital and making them very uncomfortable.
So there's a lot happening right now with the conversation. I agree with Angela that we do need to defund. As far as storming the capitals, no. What we should have is we should have a government that is responsive enough to the people so that you should be able to go ahead and be heard, and they don't need to be afraid. As far as whether or not they're all murderers in there, they're freshman Congress people who haven't cast a single vote on an issue that were in that room. All right, so this whole throwing these casting these aspersions on all of them, it's absurd. But moving on, then Pod saying that it's liberals who were doing it, but then it was a couple bad apples. And the truth is, Trump is the one who is at the rally and then got his supporters excited. And just as Joe pointed out, they've been doing this as, practice runs at the state level. They did it in Michigan where they shut down the state capitol. They had a plan to kidnap the governor there. They've been getting more bold. We know exactly who this was. Okay, this wasn't, they disappeared and then a new group showed up. This was the exact far-right people who were there for Trump's rally, and then Trump told them, hey, go down to the Capitol. That's where it's happening right now. That is where the injustice is being perpetrated, all right? This is 100% consistent with what Trump has been saying, what they've all been saying, and now they want to suddenly say, no, it's somebody else that did it. That makes no sense. At no Black Lives Matter protest did any of the people organizing the protest say, that is where we need to go. We need to attack that building. We need to attack that. And in fact, as I already mentioned, a lot of the damage has been shown to be done by people who are completely unaffiliated with the cause, right? That is not the case now. We had cameras on them the entire time, as Joe already mentioned. They followed them down the mall to the building where they went in, right? And so at this point, it's like the idea of, does this show that there is fundamentally a massive problem with how we react? Yes. Just look at the Black Lives Matter protest in DC. Let's just compare apples to apples right now. All right. We have, they're armed and they're going to protect, as Pod was saying, they're out there to protect the buildings and the monuments. Isn't the Capitol one of those? Yes. Yes, it is. All right. And Trump, if only Trump had wanted a photo, like a photo opportunity right where they were standing, okay, then he would have gone ahead and, recalled Barr back into the office so that he could authorize, rubber bullets and tear gas in order to clear peaceful protesters out of the way. Okay,
we've got a couple of minutes left, but real quickly, I look at change throughout history, and a lot of violent change does have change. But a lot of great change comes through legal channels. I mean, a lot of these people that did this violence are just going to end up in jail. There's not a lot that's going to happen of change that they're going to have, right? So legal channels have typically been the way to accelerate change quicker than violent protests. Is that a true statement, David?
100%. If you actually have a case to be made. If all you're doing is saying that the sky is purple, and we're going to invade the Capitol until the sky is purple, then no. Then legal avenues and also invading the Capitol won't turn the sky purple, right? They are basically they're being fed bad information, okay? And Trump, as I already mentioned, was able to be heard out more than anybody else would be able to be heard out. He was basically for his entire slew of cases. His own judges that he appointed shot him down consistently, right? And why? Because there's no evidence. Every time he said there's evidence, there was no evidence. Even when they had people sign affidavits, those people later came back and would admit that, I didn't actually see what's in that affidavit, or that's not totally accurate. And 100% of the time, 100% of the cases, it's completely failed. And these were Trump's judges and Republican secretaries of state.
Pod, I'm going to give you 20 seconds to respond. Go ahead.
Just one comment about those 50 cases. Not one had a chance to be heard. Not one case was heard. And that's what they're not telling you.
Every one of them was.
They were not heard, David. Not one case was heard. They were shut down before everybody could go and talk about them.
Well, it's because you're interrupting. You keep Donald Trumping everyone, so I keep, reacting.
All right, guys, I appreciate our guests coming on. I appreciate the conversation. If you as a viewer like this, share it, subscribe to the channel. We'll see you next time. Thanks. Bye, guys.